in the Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues. I can say good morning now because it is midnight in Washington, D.C., so we have finally caught up to the rest of the world. I still think our friends in California are in Wednesday, but most of us are now Thursday. So, pleasure to be here with you. I'm Brian Morales. I'm the chief of the Counter-Narcotics Branch at the U.S. Department of State, and welcome to the first sub-working group meeting of Working Group 3.3, addressing populations in contact with the criminal justice system, including alternatives to incarceration. I'm going to just give some very quick administrative announcements to get ourselves started. Over the past 2 days, we have had yesterday 4 sub-working group sessions for sub-working group 1 on manufacturing and trafficking and 2 on detecting threats and emerging patterns. And then we've had 2 other sessions on public health. I want to point to, and this is our last session, which is 3.3. I want to point to the email address at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, Synthetics Coalition at state.gov. You can reach us there and provide us with any comments, questions, thoughts, ways that we can make your experience in the coalition more productive. We're looking forward to hearing from you. I also want to share that registration for the working groups and sub-working groups will remain open for the duration of the coalition until September of next year. If you would like access to these links, please email us and we'll send them to you. We encourage you to share these links with other government partners and other international organization partners so that they can also join the coalition meetings. A new website is under development. Only the presentations from today will be recorded and posted on the website, but only the presentations, not the comments. So following the presentations for today, we will stop the recording and we'll be free to open and speak frankly with one another without the recording. International organization coordinators will also be preparing a summary of today's meeting, along with summaries of all the other meetings, and we will be, again, putting all of those summaries for the meetings on the coalition website for you all to have access to. In the next few weeks, we as the Secretariat will also be sending the meeting schedule and calendar invites to all participants for the next few months as well. And I would finally like to say that we are inviting, if you are interested in co-chairing, we are inviting co-chairs for sub-working groups 1.1 on manufacturing, where we have a vacancy, as well as 2.1 on data collection, analysis, and trends. If you are interested to serve as co-chair, please send an email to, again, Synthetics Coalition at state.gov. And now I'm going to end by reviewing the meeting schedule for the coming year. This month, we are looking at framing the issue, looking at the major challenges with relation to our topic. Between November and February, we will be looking at best practices, models, and identifying concrete initiatives, programs, activities that we as a coalition can work together on. And so we will be developing a list of activities and initiatives. And once we identify the deliverables, we'll be making commitments in terms of where our countries would like to continue working where we've been working, expand initiatives where we've been working, or create brand new initiatives where we have not worked before. In March, we will have a check-in meeting with coalition working groups. Between April and July, we will have meetings to prepare for implementation and action planning, and then we will get our work started. And in August, we will be discussing evaluation and transition to sustainability, not because we will be finishing our work, but because we will be turning our work over into other organizations or other processes that will continue for years to come. So we hope that we will be able to expand our work, stimulate a lot of initiatives during this year, and continue with kind of impetus and initiative and drive over the coming years. But the coalition will come to an end in September when we have our final working group meeting and the sub-working groups report to the working groups the final conclusions of the successful year that we have had. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this time, and I am going to now turn it over and introduce our leadership for today's sub-working group number 3.3. First, I would like to introduce the coordinators from the international organizations that are assisting us as Secretariat. We have Milos Stojanovic, the program manager from UNODC in Manila, and Anya Busev, the program manager from UNODC in Vienna. I believe it's a bit early in Vienna, so I think Anya is not joining us for this session, but I'd like to pause for the welcome from Milos. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brian. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. My name is Milos. For the sake of the time, I'm just going to briefly present myself. I'm coming from the UNODC, a regional program for the Southeast Asia and Pacific program office in Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now I would like to introduce our co-chairs for this session, Subworking Group 3.3. From Kazakhstan, we have Dr. Daulet Baypiasov, the Deputy CEO for Strategic Development in the Republican Scientific and Practical Center of Mental Health. From the Philippines, we have Mr. Aris Manguera, Senior Assistant City Prosecutor Chief of Heinous Crimes Division, Office of the City Prosecutor from Makati, from the Department of Justice. And I would be remiss if I also didn't invite and welcome for his welcome the Secretary Catalino Cui, the Chairman of the Dangerous Drugs Board, also for a few words. So I'm going to turn it over to the three of them in that order for your welcome, and then from there we will move on to today's presentation.
Brian, and we welcome all the participants to this Subworking Group 3.3 to discuss particular topic addressing population in contact with the criminal justice system, including alternatives to incarceration. And we encourage and urge all the participants to share their experiences and comment and reaction to the presenters later on. It will be a very valuable inputs to the final product that we should be able to come up at the end of these activities. Thank you very much.
Yes, and Dr. Daulet, Prosecutor Manguera. I don't know, Dr. Daulet. I think your microphone is muted. If you could unmute. We might be having some audio issues. I'll turn it over to the prosecutor.
Hi, Brian. Good morning, everyone. Secretary Kui, good morning. I'm just very excited to be with you here today. And of course, we'll hear from Professor Igor Kautzenok later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll pause again to see if Dr. Daulet Baisapov is available. If not, we will catch up with him after the presentation. Okay.
And Dr. Daulet is saying that his video is unsteady in the picture. I turned his video off, and we can try to contact him again. Let me try to contact him in Russian, if you don't mind, on the Russian channel, if you give me 1 second.
Sure.
Доктор Балписов, здравствуйте. Попробуйте выбрать другой микрофон. Пойдите в левую часть зума, там кнопка, и попробуйте, посмотрите, какой там микрофон у вас. И правильно ли он выбран. И потом попробуйте со мной тоже поговорить, потому что сейчас мы вас не слышим. Соответственно, мы видим, что у вас микрофон выключен, вернее, включен, но мы вас не слышим. Поэтому попробуйте выбрать другой микрофон, если он у вас там есть. И если будут какие-то проблемы, то пишите мне в чате. And let me go ahead to switch to the English channel. And I have instructed the speaker to try a different microphone. And unfortunately, the speaker is unresponsive, so I recommend that we proceed, and then I will try to communicate with the speaker in the chat and try to troubleshoot.
Very good. Thank you so much, Cyril. Yes, let's begin with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. The presentation is starting.
Good morning, my friends. Good morning for me. It's probably evening in some other countries, but it's morning for me in California. Thank you very much for inviting me to share with you some thoughts that I'm about to share. I want to thank all of you who are involved in this global coalition and doing a lot of really exceptional work relevant to drug demand reduction, prevention, treatment, recovery, rehabilitation. And today I will be very happy to share with you some ideas relevant to the principles of treatment of substance use disorders in clients who are involved in criminal justice system, one way or another, with different severity, different types of systems, but they're in generally speaking, justice involved clients. I definitely appreciate, this is what I would like to share with you from the very beginning. I do appreciate the differences between the countries, the economics, the traditions, the system set up, and many other differences. And definitely, I am far from telling you what to do and how to do it. You definitely need to decide should you decide to do something in terms of treatment of people with substance use disorders and criminal justice context. You will definitely do it based on your local circumstances and local situation. Yet, I would like to share with you some fundamental principles that could be helpful in your decision-making across the board. And you may consider utilizing some of these principles, again, should you decide to do something relevant to treatment in criminal justice context. One of the things that I would like to start with from the very beginning, language makes a lot of difference, and language is an expression of our thinking. This is why I would prefer myself, and if I may, I would suggest you, to use the least stigmatizing questions. Our clients are stigmatized anyway. So I would rather avoid using the words like offenders, defenders, patients even. I prefer to talk about justice-involved clients. I found this terminology is the most neutral and the least stigmatizing. Here is what we know from the science. This is actually a global trend. The more severe is the substance use disorder, the greater is the severity, the more likely that this individual will end up under criminal justice supervision and sometimes even in prisons. There is a linear relationship right here, and we know it for many years. Forgive me. One of the things that we need to consider, again, is not the personal opinion, personal belief system, but the facts. And the facts are generated by the science. So let's take a look, what do we know from the science? There is no single study that would suggest a sustainable positive behavioral change as a result of criminal justice pressure alone. Meaning punishment or threat of punishment actually is not what may give you some chances for a positive, sustainable behavioral change. In fact, we have a number of studies clearly suggesting that, particularly in some subgroups of people with substance use disorders, particularly people younger than 25, if the only thing that we do is a criminal justice punishment, meaning pressure, we are making them worse. They will be more likely to recidivate and more likely to relapse with drugs and alcohol. We also know that if we place people in prisons, people with any kind of disorder, with any kind of dysfunction, with any kind of criminal life trajectory, all the prisons in the world, regardless how do they look, what is the setup, what is the physical layout, all the prisons in the world have incapacitating effect, which is in fact just the opposite to what we want to see in addiction treatment, in treatment of substance use disorder, empowering people, enforcing them, and making them practice new behaviors that are less problematic than the previous ones. Definitely with prisons or with, in fact, any kind of criminal justice pressure, you will be most likely, you will succeed in making people comply, meaning using criminal justice pressure alone, most likely you will be able to force people to do things they're not willing to do. So we're talking about compliance. And unfortunately, compliance has nothing to do with a sustainable behavioral change and recovery. Compliance means you're suppressing a behavior that is less than desirable. A police officer will make you comply in most of the cases in literally 2 minutes. The problem with compliance, those of you, I presume some of the viewers, some of the participants are criminal justice professionals and practitioners, people who work in criminal justice system in various capacities. Most likely, almost for sure, you will make the person comply. But the problem with compliance is the compliance lasts only as long as you have control over the person, with very predictable return back to the previous problematic behavior as soon as your control fades. So you will be able to make people comply. Unfortunately, you will never be able to sustain it. One of the important things for those of you, particularly who are treatment practitioners, remember, we are not discussing only the individuals who are using substances because they have a substance use disorder. This, in my mind, should not be, the use itself should not be a matter of criminal prosecution to begin with at all. But this is my point of view. At the same time, we are reviewing the population, people who have at least two major sets of problems. On one hand, they have a substance use disorder with some severity, and on the other hand, they are involved in life criminal trajectory. So they have more than two sets of problems, but these are the two major. In fact, some of these people are heavily involved in criminal enterprise. This is important because let's ask ourselves, if we provide treatment, therapeutic, behavioral treatment services, and maybe not just behavioral, sometimes medication can help too, but if we provide any kind of services relevant to substance use disorders to a population of people who are involved in significant crime, what is the goal? Is the goal just to get them into recovery and support them to maintain the recovery? This is a wonderful goal. And this is the typical goal of any addiction treatment in the community all over the world. Considering the population we are discussing right now, the actual goal, one of the goals, is equally important, by the way, is to make sure that our clients, the individuals we are treating, as a result of our intervention, will be less likely to commit another crime. Otherwise, unfortunately, let me make it clear to you, we are at risk sometimes to create sober criminals who could be even more dangerous. So let's make sure we are clear about the goal. The goal of interventions in criminal justice context is not just to help people to initiate recovery and stay in recovery as long as possible. The equally important goal is to make sure that as a result of our work, therapeutic work, our clients will be less likely to commit another crime, meaning the public safety protection for all of us is an equally important goal as public health improvements, meaning treatment and recovery in our clients. In order to do that, one of the key important factors for all of us to appreciate, regardless of what your belief system, what your training, what your experience tells you, to appreciate a fact. And the fact is that substance use disorders are not a moral failure or lack of willpower or not being moral or not being religious, none of the things that we used to believe even 30, 40 years ago. Considering the level of science that we have right now, particularly generated in the last 20 years, it is really difficult to deny that substance use disorders are by far more complex problems than just lack of willpower or a bad habit. substance use disorders are chronic and relapsing brain conditions with behavioral expression and with the tendency for chronicity. It means it takes long time to recover, sometimes a lifetime. This is something that, again, I'm not trying to justify anything. I'm not trying to change your belief system. I'm trying to present you the facts. I'm trying to understand what is the nature of the problem I'm working with, because if I don't understand it, it is highly unlikely I will be effective. This is all, it goes back to the issue of effectiveness. Let's take a look at what we, let me make a step back, because I said effectiveness. How do we measure the effect? Because people may have all sorts of ideas what effect, what the good outcome may look like. Well, there are two indicators that I will be the most interested in reviewing and analyzing in order to say, yes, there is an effect, or no, there isn't. One is the rates of drug and alcohol relapses in our clients, and two is the rates of re-offending, meaning committing criminal recidivism, committing another crime of some type. Because these are the two goals that I have in mind when I discuss the issue of treatment in criminal justice context: public health protection and public safety protection, and they're both equally important. So criminal recidivism reduction and the rates of drug and alcohol relapse reduction. If you look at this line, this is what we have generally globally in terms of the policies and different approaches to individuals with substance use disorders who are involved one way or another in the criminal justice system. From the left to the right, this is actually the incrementally increasing intensity of intervention, from the least invasive, from the least intense diversion type of programs, when people are diverted from the criminal justice system into the therapeutic system with the expectation that treatment will take care of the problems, and in many instances it does, through probation, drug courts, intermediate sanctions, all the way to incarceration. This is the incremental increase in the complexity, intensity of interventions, depending on the needs and depending on the local circumstances in each country. Definitely from the cost perspective, the diversion programs are the cheapest. The incarceration and the imprisonment are the most expensive type of interventions because they're the most intense and the most invasive. At the same time, from the public safety perspective, it is just the opposite. While people are in prison, they're less likely to commit another crime on the streets. So the reason why I'm talking about it, when we consider interventions in a criminal justice context, let's be mindful, we are trying to serve the two masters, the public safety and the public budget. And it is really difficult to make both happy. This is a really enormously difficult task, yet it is possible to do. Now let's discuss, let's think together. Since we are talking about people who have committed some form of illegal activity based on your local legislation and your local law, what will happen if we place them all to prison? We've done it. We've done it not just in the United States, we've done it globally. In some countries, we continue doing that, just relying that the prisons will take care of drug use or substance use disorder problems. If we rely on prisons only, we know quite well what will happen. And what will happen, the majority of people 3 years from now will commit another crime. Almost all of them will relapse with drugs and alcohol. So that doesn't look like a terribly effective strategy. Okay, what if we do just the opposite? What if we rely on treatment? Because we are talking about people who exhibit criteria, they meet the criteria for substance use disorder, which is one of the diagnosable conditions based on both the DSM-5 and the ICD, International Classification of Diseases in the world. So they have a diagnosable mental health condition. Since that's the case, well, let's think what will happen if we forget about criminal justice sanctions completely, if we forget about any kind of criminal justice involvement, and rely on treatment strategies only, treatment interventions. This sounds like a logical idea, but the problem is, in many of our clients, if we rely only on therapeutic interventions and forget about any kind of criminal justice pressure, unfortunately, most of the clients will never show up even for intake assessment. And let me share with you a big secret. It is really difficult to treat somebody who is not there. So you did quite simple concept. So that doesn't look like a very good idea. Let me summarize what I just said. If we rely on public health approach, treatment, recovery support only, forgetting about any kind of criminal justice involvement, unfortunately, we will get very high attrition rates. If we do the opposite thing, if we heavily rely or solely rely on criminal justice system, prisons, probation, drug courts, without any type of meaningful therapeutic interventions, just pressure or punishment or threat of punishment, unfortunately, we'll have very high recidivism rates. So that doesn't look like, it looks like neither of these systems is capable to produce the result that we are looking for. Criminal recidivism reduction, public safety protection, and the reduction in the rates of drug and alcohol relapses and problems, meaning public health protection. Neither of the system by itself alone is capable to give us the result that we are willing to see. Okay, what if we combine the two? What if we combine the best from the therapeutic world with the best from the criminal justice world and see what will happen next? We have done this. We've made many mistakes in the last, let's say, 40, 50 years. Any kind of treatment intervention in criminal justice context that you can think of actually has been implemented, and most of the interventions did not succeed. They have failed. They did not produce the outcome, and this is why I think it's important to make sure we have some understanding of the type of interventions that have been implemented. They have been evaluated, and they actually did not produce any result. Fear-based intervention, trying to shame, to blame individuals, you will be wasting your time. Isolated drug education, placing people in a classroom, telling them how bad it is to use amphetamines or heroin, and as if they don't know. Self-help programs alone. Self-help are 12 steps. Please pay attention. The key word here is alone. 12-step model is the model that millions of people got their recovery from. Considering the level of dysfunctions in many of our clients, in most cases, this 12-step model does not have enough intensity to address their issues. However, if we add the self-help 12-step component on top of other things that we are doing that are more intense, that will actually increase the effectiveness significantly. So the key word here is alone. Harsh confrontational approaches, like in traditional old-fashioned therapeutic communities, confronting people into their face, yelling and screaming, trying to introduce some behavioral change through different strategies, but one of them is the harsh confrontation. That doesn't seem like an effective approach either, based on what we know from the science now. So there are some of the strategies that have been implemented, they have been evaluated, and actually we have no evidence they can result in any positive outcomes. So what we can do, what works, and how to make it work. If you really want to make it work, we need to answer 4 questions. We need to decide whom to treat. Unfortunately, we cannot help everybody. We need to make a decision whom to refer to treatment. We need to decide what exactly we are treating, substance use or maybe a combination of many other things. Substance use is just one element of it. How do we do that? There are different treatment models available. Which one or combination of models we will use? And the 4th question, how well do we do that? Do we have any fidelity and quality in our treatment? In order to decide whom to treat, we need to measure 2 things. We need to measure the risks, meaning risk for reoffending or risk for continuous involvement in any level of criminal or illegal behaviors. And we also need to measure the needs. What are the needs? I'm skipping some of the slides because they may or may not be directly related to our conversation. But the risk, let me go back. Risks are this is a score, if you wish, of very measurable indicators from the past and from the present that will actually give you pretty good prediction what is likely to happen from the criminal justice perspective. What is likely to happen, how likely that this person will commit another crime, which could be an important decision for any country in the world if you decide to implement some of the strategies that we are discussing. We also need to decide what are the needs of the individuals. The needs are the life attributes that may or may not be directly linked to criminal behavior or illegal behavior. And definitely, and there's a number of needs like a lack of housing, unemployment, mental health issue, financial illiteracy, emotional illiteracy, impulsivity. There are lots of different needs, and they're very unique and individual. And we need to measure the needs in every case in order to determine what type of intervention is necessary. Some of these needs are criminogenic, others are not. The most criminogenic needs, meaning the human needs that are directly related to the potential of repetitive criminality, are criminal affiliation, criminogenic thinking errors, and substance use disorders. When we discuss what is it that we are treating, substance use or something else, we really want to make sure that substance use in our population is not the only thing we are doing, because people we are working with, they have, I will skip some of these slides, forgive me. People we are working with, they have a variety of different challenges: medical, financial, mental health, vocational training, education, legal issues, HIV, hepatitis C risks, family dysfunctions, childcare issues. So even though we talk about the use of strategies in treatment of substance use disorders applied in criminal justice context to justice-involved population, let's be mindful. In fact, we are not treating just substance use. We are dealing with a huge range of different problems that individual problems that individuals may experience. And unless these processes and these problems are addressed through the therapeutic process, through the therapeutic interventions, it will be highly unlikely, even if we focus solely on their use of substances, and we don't pay attention to other issues, and there are many, that would be highly unlikely we will be successful with this individual. So when we talk about risk and we talk about needs, there are two variables, there are four possible combinations. And in fact, these are four subpopulations that you will be working with should you decide to implement those strategies in different countries. And they respond differently to different treatments. Some of them should not be in treatment to begin with, and let me walk you through very briefly. This group, high risk for criminal recidivism and high needs for treatment, usually these are people, when you do the assessment, you will find that delinquency, the early delinquency, precedes the onset of substance use. So there are some indications of illegal activities before they started using drugs and alcohol. And then people start using drugs and alcohol. Typically, it doesn't help. So now by the time they get into the criminal justice system, they will score really high on the severity of substance use disorder, and most likely they will score really high on the risk for reoffending or continuing being involved in criminal justice, in criminality, criminal behavior. You will be surprised that this is the population that actually responds quite well to treatment. If we combine high intensity treatment, different models, and I will tell you what the models are, with some initial criminal justice intervention, at least to get their attention as the initial push to initiate the therapeutic process. And the ratio between the two, at least initially, is probably 50-50. 50% treatment interventions with some initial criminal justice pressure to get their attention and to work on their motivation from external to internal. The low risk and high needs individuals right here, these are people whose criminality is secondary to their severe substance use disorder. In other words, most likely they would have never committed any crime had they not been so severely ill with substance use disorder. Do they need the criminal justice pressure? Yes, initially they do. But what they really need is a significant, intense, and typically long-term treatment intervention. And the ratio between treatment and criminal justice push now will be quite different. They don't need a heavy hammer. They need a lot of treatment. But they do need some initial criminal justice pressure, at least for the motivation change reason. High risk and low need individuals, they're right here. Folks, unfortunately, these are people who usually do not respond well to the typical treatment interventions, and they commit a lot of crime. But the good news, this is a very small population, even in prison settings. It's a 4 to 5%, even in custody settings. So it's a small population, a small group of people. They cause a lot of trouble, and they do not respond well to treatment. In the previous classifications, DSM or ICD, we used to call them psychopaths. We don't use this terminology anymore because it's very stigmatizing, but I guess you got the picture. So these are people who should be, because of they present significant problem from the public safety standpoint. They should be under the criminal justice supervision as long as possible and as close as possible. But this is a very small population, very few people that I really would not spend much attention other than just making sure that they're supervised by the criminal justice colleagues. And this subgroup, low risk and low need, these are people who actually, for whom we don't have any evidence of severe criminogenic needs, nor we have any significant evidence for severe substance use disorder. These are typically people who, forgive me, they got drunk and did something stupid. Now they don't have time for a good lawyer, and they end up in a prison or on probation or in drug courts. But these are people who, in fact, most likely they will be fine with minimum interventions or even no intervention. So referring them for high intensity treatment will be counterproductive because we will be wasting resources. These are people who tend to be well anyway, with minimum motivational interviewing conversation, very brief cognitive behavioral interventions, and good prevention to make sure that this behavior will never happen again. That most likely will be sufficient. So the two populations that I would be very interested in referring to treatment inside the criminal justice context are these two. And I would probably be very careful. Most likely, I would not refer these two populations into treatment, the typical treatment we are talking about, for different reasons. I would probably screen them out. In terms of what does work and the type of interventions that have been found effective in this population, in this criminal justice context, brief interventions, motivation enhancement therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, some contingency management strategies, particularly in conjunction with cognitive behavioral therapy, 12-step as an adjunct to more intense treatment, vocational educational interventions have been found effective, family restructuring interventions, and let's not forget about the medication-assisted strategies. We do not have medication for every type of substance use disorder. We have medications right now only for alcohol use disorder, opioid use disorder, and nicotine use disorder. We don't have medication for anything else. Also, let's be mindful, medication alone is not going to take care of the problem. Exactly like in patients with diabetes. Even if you have a patient with diabetes who responds beautifully to medication, but the patient is 250 kilograms, doesn't keep a diet, does not exercise, keeps smoking, and keeps eating all sorts of sweets and cookies every day, medication is not going to help much. This patient is going to die anyway. So the medication in our case, in case of substance use disorder, because of the complexity of the disorder, the medication could be helpful in many instances, it is really a good addition to treatment of some types of patients. But let's be mindful, medication alone is not going to solve the problem, but could be very effective and very important component of treatment. Okay, and the last thing I want to tell you that if you should you decide to implement any kind of science-based, evidence-based interventions in criminal justice context, let's make sure, please, don't overlook the issue of quality assurance, making sure that treatment you're implementing, the interventions you're implementing, are done with fidelity and good quality. Not to control you, just the opposite. To make sure that you have periodic information. What are you doing well? What is missing? What needs some improvement? And then you can react quickly to that. So let's make sure we utilize the interventions the way they have been intended, with good fidelity and good quality. And with that, I really want to thank you for your attention. I hope what I said makes sense to you, and what I shared with you could be of some use to you should you decide to utilize those strategies. And I'm definitely will make myself available if you have any questions to me through email, through the INL. And once again, I want to thank you for the opportunity you gave to me to share with you some thoughts. And good luck to all of you. And thank you again for your hard work. All the best.
Okay, that was a great presentation from Professor Igor Kautzinok. He is a professor of psychiatry and director of the Center for Criminality and Addiction Research and Training at the University of California, San Diego. He's also the director of the International Technology Transfer Center in Ukraine. And we are actually fortunate to have him with us today. He can answer questions. Can you say some words, Professor Igor?
Sure, very good to see all of you, and I'm really thrilled. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you, particularly people in Washington, D.C., for staying alive that long. Well, thanks a lot. I will be happy if I can answer your question. If you have questions, I will definitely try to answer.